Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to Let's Build That App. Hope you guys are doing well. Today I'm going to introduce a brand new series to the channel. I'm going to call it Firebase Social Login. So the reason why I'm doing this is because lately I've been doing a lot of OAuth and social platform authentication. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do this for your applications as well, because as you guys probably already know, social login is pretty important as in terms of trying to get new users to use your application. Let's get started today with a very quick demo as to what our application will look like at the very end of our series, and we'll talk about what it is we will cover for today's video. Okay, so in the simulator we have the somewhat completed application, and we have a couple of buttons that will log into various social providers such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter. So the main focus for today's video is to implement this purple button at the very top. Hitting this will trigger the authentication process. Normally it'll tell you to fill in your credentials and then you can hit OK. When that is done, it'll hand back the credentials to your application, which this alert is going to take and it's going to send over to Firebase, creating our new user in that system. So you don't have to worry about Firebase too much for today's video. All we're going to be focusing on is the Facebook login aspect of the application. So if you click on Google sign in, it's going to do something very similar, handing you back the Google credentials, and then it creates that Firebase user. So all this looks pretty good, and we are going to kind of get started here. Before we get into code, let's quickly talk about the three things we want to get done for today. The first of which is to install the SDK with Cocoapods. It's pretty easy. Secondly, want to register an application with Facebook's developer website. And then lastly, we'll go into the integration of the actual button and then triggering the authentication. So that's the plan for today. And how do we get started, or where should we begin? The first thing is to actually look at the Facebook's developer website for iOS SDK. To get here, you can type Facebook iOS SDK, click on the very first link, and then click on Getting Started. This is a very good place to start. And looking at the very first step right here, so you see 6 steps. It's actually going to go by pretty quickly. The first step is to open up this Facebook app dashboard. So let's just go through step number 1. And then that link opens up this. What you need to do is you're going to want to create a new application, which I'll call Firebase Social Login. Doesn't really matter so much. Click a category down here, education perhaps. And now you can fill in this really crazy CAPTCHA code, which hopefully I'll do correctly. And now it's going to generate this application inside of Facebook. Here we go. While we wait, looks like it's done already. So let's go back to the Getting Started page. And we want to go into settings and add this platform for iOS. So go back to this right here, settings on the left, add a platform. Obviously click iOS, and then now we need a bundle ID for our actual iOS application, which you kind of get from Xcode, right? So why don't we go ahead and go into Xcode, and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N, giving me this new project screen. Just click there, Firebase Social Login. Sounds pretty good. Hit Next, create it somewhere in my computer. And here we go. Bundle ID is the first thing we see right there. Going back to, let's see, Chrome. Going here, bundle ID fits right there. Click that. I think we need to turn this on. And then we just hit Save Changes. So that's what we need to do. See, bundle ID goes in there, single sign-on, Save Changes. So that's pretty good. Now we are ready to move on to step 2. So I told you this was going to go by pretty fast, right? And step 2. Step 2 and step 3 is actually just one step for us now. Way back in the day in like 2012, 2013, when I did this for the first time, they actually wanted you to download a zip file, unzip it, drag something into your Xcode project, and then compile it with a header file, which is down here somewhere. So all that is pretty difficult and confusing. But luckily for you guys, it's 2016, and you guys all you guys need to do is to install the entire package with Cocoapods. So what do we want to do with this project? Or how do we install the Facebook SDK with this project now? The easiest way to do so is to click on this advanced topics on the left. In the very bottom, there's this block here that contains these 3 pods that you need to install. So I'm going to highlight that, copy that for now. And we need to do something interesting with the terminal right now, which I'm going to enter into right here. And here we go. So terminal is right there. To open it, you just do terminal, you get this black box. And now we want to actually change into this directory of our project. And to do so easily, you drag that controller Swift there, gets me the Swift file. I'm going to backspace all the way into there. Go to the beginning, hit CD, and there we go. Change directory into that project, right? So to initialize, we just hit pod and init. Some of you guys don't have Cocoapods installed, should look up how to install Cocoapods. Google search how to install Cocoapods, obviously. And now we are ready to edit this pod file. So usually what you can do is hit open pod file, and it's going to open up in text edit for me. It might be different for you, but those 3 pods that we copied earlier, you just want to paste it right below this section here, kind of like this, right? I'm gonna hit Command S, Command W to exit out there. And now I can say cat pod file, which will actually list out the contents of that file. So with those 3 pods inside of this configuration, I'm going to hit pod install. It's going to install these 3 Facebook SDKs for me inside my project. So with that all being done, we don't really need this project anymore. And this actually tells us to kind of close that project, right? So all we need to do is actually execute open on this. So open that, which will open up a different project entirely, which is this workspace project. And this now contains these 3 pods inside of our project, which will allow us to utilize Facebook's SDK to perform the authentication of our Facebook user. So that's pretty good. And we can go back to the Getting Started page now. Looks like we're in advanced topics and we don't need this anymore. We're pretty good to go for now, at least. And step 3 is pretty much taken care of. And we're already on to step 4 of the guide. And we're pretty much done, pretty much. So what do we need to actually do here? Well, it's telling us to open up this plist file, add source code, and then entering all this stuff into the plist file. So I'm just going to copy all this and ignore that bottom part. Going back to Xcode here, open up that plist and open up as source code. You can either enter up here or on the bottom, doesn't really matter so much. So I'm going to hit that. And we have a couple of placeholder strings that we need to fill out, which is there, and there as well. And where do we get those little pieces of information? So we want to go back to this dashboard, which is conveniently left up here. The app ID is this right here. So going back to app ID, we want to fill in that app ID. Obviously, is going to be different for your guys' application, your app name. I think this is going to be called Firebase Social Login. I'm not really sure if it matters what you call it. It'll show up later on when you actually try to authenticate your user though. So that's that. And going back to the guide, let's go back to the guide here. We're going to move on to step number 5. So all that was pretty easy, right? What I'm going to do now is go back to Xcode. I'm going to run this project just to verify that everything is compiling and that the SDK is running without any problems. So build succeeded, and then the application is going to run with a white screen. So white screen is pretty good. The first thing I want to kind of show you guys how to do is how to eliminate all of this garbage output that Xcode 8 seems to love so much. And the one thing to change is to edit the scheme for this run debug scheme. Go in here, type in OS activity mode. Pretty sure some of you guys already know how to do this. Hit close, run the application, and all of that strange output will now go away, except for this guy. So this guy is just a pretty harmless warning. And there we go. So I just removed some of this unnecessary code and that comment right there. And if I wanted to really import this FB SDK login kit, I can do so already because Cocoapods makes these SDKs available for us. So that's good. Going back to the guide, I want to complete step number 5 now, which is to connect our AppDelegate with the FB SDK application delegate. So obviously, if you're looking at this right now, and you'll notice that Swift 3 is our current syntax, but this code right here is written in Objective-C. So I'm going to show you guys how to convert this stuff into Swift 3. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to look at did finish launching with the options that implement this method right here. So I'm going to copy that. Go back to AppDelegate, and did finish launching is right there. We'll remove that comment. And so this is what we need to fix right there. And to do this, we need to first import this FB SDK core kit. And right below, I'll show you guys how to say FB SDK application delegate shared instance application. And then we need to use that. Application goes here. And this really should be launch options. So that is that. And bam, we're already done with converting one of those methods to Swift 3. Now we need to convert this guy to Swift 3 as well. So this is the open URL with the options parameter. And below we will just override that with this guy right here. So open URL options is the method. I'm going to paste that Objective-C code right there. And let's convert this guy right here into Swift 3 syntax, right? So let handle equals FB SDK application delegate shared instance, and this will be open URL right there. Okay, so all we need to do is we need to copy this right here into, let's see there. But first, let's fill out application with this app variable up top. URL is this URL from up there. So URL. And this is that bit, the options that I just copied. So let's do that one more time. Options and key. And then for this bottom one, we want to do the same thing as well. So let's just copy that in there. And bam, there you go. So this perhaps looks a little bit scary. I think I need options right here, right? Is that what I need? Okay, so that looks pretty good. Hopefully the compiler will help me fix this error. So that's the first fix. We don't really need this stuff anymore, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. And if we let the compiler sit there for long enough, it actually needs to, let's see, return this handled Boolean variable is what we get from this return value. And now we can just hit this. It'll fix that for us with a new Swift syntax for this key. And likewise for this bottom one right there. And from the application, we'll see that the app builds successfully, and then we'll get our white screen again. So pretty good. Nothing too fancy so far, but we know that our application is running and we're kind of ready right now to implement the actual login button for our application. So here it's telling us to add app events, but we really don't need that. All we're concerned about in our application is to actually trigger the authentication process with this button right here. So you'll notice how it says log out right now. If I log out, it says log in. So this button actually knows whether or not the user is logged in. So how do we get access to this button? Well, if you go back to view controller, and once you've imported FB SDK login kit, you can get access to this login button with FB SDK login button right there. And then you can say view.add subview is the actual call, login button. And here, if you run the application, I think you'll see a glimpse of the actual button inside of your application. And you see at the very top left, this blue thing right here, it's actually there, but because the frame is incorrect, we can modify the frame ourselves with a CG rect with this X right here, and perhaps we'll use 16 for the X, and I'll just use perhaps 50. This will say view frame with minus 32. You guys don't really need to know why the calculation is like this, but it's going to place the button nicely right there with proper spacing on the left and right. And all of you guys that are screaming at me right now for using frames, I already know that frames are obsolete. Please use constraints instead. So, because it's 2016 after all. But definitely use constraints. Frames really don't make sense nowadays. Anyhow, if we hit this login button, what do we expect to happen? So login, we get the actual Facebook to tell us to log in as whoever you want to be, right? So normally this is going to tell you to punch in your username and password. Because I've already done so, it's going to allow me to grant access to the application with my credentials. So I know that this is actually not working correctly because this button right here should say log out whenever I log in properly, but it's not saying that. So I know something's going wrong. And the way to kind of verify this is to set the delegate on this login button like this equals self. And this delegate needs to be conforming to FB SDK login button delegate right here. If you command and click into this, you'll see these two methods that you need to actually implement in View Controller. The first of which is login button. Let's see, did log out right there. And we'll just print did log out of Facebook. And the second method is to say login button. And you'll notice this is the more important method of did complete with result, and also this error method or parameter at the very end. So if error not nil, that means we have a problem. So I'm going to print out, let's see, print, the caps lock is on, print error and return. Otherwise, we'll say print successfully logged in with Facebook. There we go. So what do we do now? Well, writing this application, these two delegate methods will be called once the application has handed us back the user from this Facebook authentication. It's been okay. But you'll notice that at the very bottom, it actually prints out this error domain code 308. So what is going on here? Why isn't this actually authenticating properly? So one thing I noticed is that the guide is missing this one step where I think it's missing a couple of things with the application. And the first of which might be to actually enable this thing called keychain sharing. So I'm going to do this and hit info or capabilities. And inside of Xcode 8, sometimes you just have to enable that before the application will have access to the keychain. So I'm not exactly sure why that is, but turning that on and hitting OK, you'll notice it says successfully logged in with Facebook. And also the button on the very top here, it says log out instead of just saying whatever log in. So that's how you know your user is properly authenticated with Facebook right now. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure to leave a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how to implement a custom Facebook login button to perform the authentication, and also how to actually get the Facebook user's email address. Also, if you want a written step-by-step guide for today's video tutorial, you can go ahead and find the link in the description below. You can also find the project that you can download and run on your machine to confirm that the code actually works. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave it down below. That's all for me today. Keep on coding, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.